Order, order, and welcome to the second session in this Select Committee's inquiry into innovation and global food security. Now, we aren't always aware of the science that lies behind the food we eat, but science and innovation play a fundamental part in the global food system, and food security is increasingly a driver of migration and conflict. And through this inquiry, we want to understand the role science plays in the global food system and what more it can do and what more the UK can do in that regard. So today we're going to be exploring the innovations that can support global food security, including AI, that's artificial intelligence in this context and not artificial insemination, and digital technologies and the challenges around making sure that new technologies can actually be put into use by farmers in this country and globally. And so I'm going to start off with a kind of overview, big picture question to each of our two witnesses this morning, who I'll ask to introduce themselves when they speak. So let's start with Dr. Belinda Clarke. If you picture an agriculture and food system that could deliver global food security, say by 2050, what are the main differences from what we have today? And what is the role of science and innovation in getting us from here to there?
Thank you very much for the question. My name is Belinda Clarke. I'm a scientist by a very deep background, a long time ago, and I now run Agri-techE, which is an independent membership organisation bringing new technology and research and those that are active in the innovation ecosystem together with farmers and growers. And we started in the east of England. We're now national in the UK and have members across 13 different countries globally. So I like thinking about this question, fast forwarding to 50 years, it's not to 2050, it's not very far away. But my vision will be as follows. I would like to see routine deployment of precision-bred crops across the world. It's patchy, it's fragmented. The UK is leading the march in the deployment of precision breeding, and that's not just in plants but also animals, deploying in insects and microbes for soil management and industrial biotech. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I would like to see deployment of Internet of Things and the tools associated with precision agriculture, again, routinely. Some of that is hardware, some of it is software, a lot of it relies, as we've just heard, on digital tools. So every farmer to be deploying digital ways of farming. I would also like to hope and expect that by 2050 we will be much smarter in our deployment of circular economy thinking and deployment, that we have a much better use of, again, a lot of the research is starting to emerge, high carbon capture cropping, alternative uses of management of so-called waste but valorization of byproducts. I think, and I know my colleague will probably come on to this, there will be a reduction in the number of animals in the farmed system, and I think that's inevitable. I would die on the hill that we would need some animals, I think, to help maintain a healthy farming system. But I hope that gives a picture of where I would see the farming system globally, and of course all empowered by science and technology for the digital tools and the software needed to really leapfrog in some of the emerging markets, the infrastructure, access to markets, access to credit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Belinda Clarke. That has given us an overview, and I note that you have emphasised high-tech solutions, if you like, around precision breeding and AI, and some mention of, if you like, lower tech and sustainability solutions, which I think the committee will want to come on to talk about. But Professor Paul Behrens, what is your vision for 2050?
Well, thank you so much for having me today here. I'm Professor Paul Behrens at the University of Oxford, the Oxford Martin School. When we think about the vision for the food system in the future, we have to imagine what toll climate change and environmental impacts are making. And we have to be clear that there are no non-radical food futures. So everything has to be around both the fact that climate change is unravelling faster than we thought in terms of the impacts on food systems, but also we have to take into account the fact of what we're doing is feeding people nutritious food. So it's those two systemic issues. When I look at the climate change, just to give you one example, the chance of multi-breadbasket failure is now going up and is estimated for corn, for example, to happen once. What would have happened once every 16 years is increasing to once every 3 years at 1.5 degrees of warming, and once every 2 years at 2 degrees of warming.
This is so. Could you just say you said
breadbasket failure, and this is a significant drop in the yields across the world, across multiple breadbaskets in the same yield, because extreme weather events hit those breadbaskets in that year.
That has huge impact on the nutritious food that people need.
It has a huge impact on food. Mm-hmm. The most direct thing that I think we should be really considering, and we underestimate, is the impact, the inflationary impact on food prices, which is incredibly socially destabilizing. Right. And research on that seems to suggest that we would have 1 to 3 percentage point increases annually on the price of food by 2035. And these are usually underestimates because they don't include things like soil degradation, pest and disease spread, infrastructure damage, and some extreme weather events, all of which are increasing. So it's with that in mind that I'm thinking about the future, a future that by the end of the century we may lose about a third of total agricultural land. So even though the temperate areas of the planet might be able to produce more, that's more than made up by the declines across the tropics. And so that's sort of where we're heading. And then when I think about the food system as a whole and whether it's feeding us very well, will we see a preponderance of obesity, overweight? We see the dietary risks of health outcomes being one of the largest drivers of mortality around the world. And so everything points in the same direction for me, and that is the increase in the consumption of plants. It's far more efficient. We have less and less land to produce agriculture, and animal agriculture requires much, much more land. So, for example, animals will essentially waste around 85 to 95% of the calories that they are fed, and use up to several hundred times more land than plants. So I see a future where we've got a large amount of land saved through these dietary transitions, which then is turned to biodiversity protection, is turned to climate absorption of flood risks, of wildfires, of droughts. And I also see a role for technology in the form of things like precision fermentation, maybe some vertical farming for micronutrients, and especially a lot of precision bred crops, as was just said by my colleague, in order to be more resilient to that future we're facing.
Thank you. Just to pick up there, both of you have emphasised the need for less meat in our diet, and Professor Behrens, you talked about a significant reduction in or increase in plant-based nutrition. Now, are you talking? This is a global issue, but the UK is a rich country. So when you talk about more plant-based, higher plant-based diet, are you speaking globally? Are you expecting populations in Africa to be eating more plants and less meat, or are you speaking about the developed world?
It's a great question, and in work that we've done, making an expert solicitation of scientists, agricultural and climate scientists around the world, and myself, think that there's no reason why regions in sub-Saharan Africa would have to cut down animal agriculture. In fact, they could even increase. The real key issues, though, are in the high-income nations, but also in the upper-middle-income nations. So we're talking Brazil, Argentina. The uptick in consumption in China, for example, it's not just sort of the high-income sort of nations that we might think about in the G8 or those groups that would need to cut down on their consumption.
Thank you. So we have to consider this in terms of the existing population food sources, as well as how they evolve in relation to climate change, but also in relation to technology. And we have had evidence, for example, that Africa as a continent actually needs to produce 99% more food if it's to by 2050, if it's to feed its population. Can you just come back to both of you? Can you sort of say how UK research and and policy can best support agricultural innovation in improving food security, A, within the UK, and B, globally? And I'll ask Dr. Belinda Clarke first.
Thank you. I think this is where the really exciting potential for innovation and technology is making itself known. And a lot of that is around digital solutions. So in the UK, for example, we now are able to deploy, farmers and the supply chain are now able to deploy new insights, new understandings of the supply chain, increase productivity. There is, I know George Freeman is spearheading the 30-50-50 initiative, which I'm sure you all know about. And so this real understanding of this critical importance to increase productivity. Technology absolutely underpins that around crop yield forecasting, weather resilience, climate smart agriculture. And I think everything that applies in the UK is equally applicable in emerging markets as well. And, the smartphone has really democratized access to technology, to information, to data. They leapfrogged in Africa, we're able to leapfrog a lot of the fixed telecoms infrastructure by using mobiles. It's opened up all sorts of e-commerce opportunities, understanding supply chains, access to markets. And I think that is the kind of engine that gets the flywheel moving, if I've got my metaphors correct. Flywheel moving to generate more food with a lower environmental impact. So I'm very passionate about the UK's capabilities in development of these technologies and then the export and deployment opportunities in other markets. And we're already seeing that. A number of the really successful UK agri-tech companies are moving beyond the shores of the UK.
Thank you, Dr. Clarke. I am surprised to hear you say that everything that applies in the UK can equally apply across the world, and that, speaking as a telecoms engineer, I would say that whilst we have seen greater access to technology through mobile phones, I'm not sure it has democratized it entirely, giving regulatory frameworks and some of the technological infrastructure. Can I just ask you again, do you have any concerns with applying UK technology that works in the UK across the world?
Obviously, if we're going to say technology in the round, it needs to be appropriate, it needs to be deployable, it needs to be serviceable. Satellite coverage, for example, is not, as I understand it, as comprehensive as we might want globally. That said, I think particularly if we're going to focus on Africa and women farmers in particular, women are producing a lot of the food in Africa. The digital access to digital services has really starting to transform their ability, and I am going to go back to the word democratization, their ability to access the markets, their digital literacy, access to best practice, agronomy advice, guidance, sharing best practice with their peers. And I've been in Africa and seen people walking. 20 years ago, they used to walk 10 miles to go to a farmer field school. Now they have WhatsApp groups. So I do think that, and that's obviously not the same as on-farm agri-tech, but that said, I think I would struggle to find too many. I mean, obviously, if you need access to fuel and things that, big machinery, but the key, I think, with exporting our knowledge and know-how is the appropriateness of the context in which it's being deployed. So I wouldn't wish to leave you with the thought that I'm advocating a cookie-cutter model, far from it, but I do think there is relevant deployment of a lot of UK technologies globally.
Thank you very much. And Professor Behrens?
I would agree a lot with that. I think one thing we do have to bear in mind is that, as I mentioned before, regions in Africa towards the end of the century, and we'll be moving through that to 2050, will be extremely challenging to produce normal open field agriculture. So normal open field agriculture will struggle for lack of water, for extreme weather events, for droughts, for heat waves. And so what does this mean? Can we keep up with the innovation? To some extent, perhaps we can in the short term, but long term, it is going to become extremely challenging, and that's what we're facing with climate change. We'll see sort of internal migration, we'll see a cross-border migration due to this. And so, what starts off as a food question becomes a sort of a human health, human security question. I would say that some, production is more climate secure than others. And so there may be the opportunity, as I say, for more precision breeding of crops which are drought and heat wave tolerant. But also we have technologies for controlled environment agriculture. So we have things like, precision fermentation, which I mentioned, but also to some extent vertical farming for some micronutrients. It will never really compete in the bulk macronutrients, but you could see a situation in the future where in the real extremes, you've got your macronutrients, your proteins being produced by precision fermentation, and you've got your micronutrients by vertical farming. But this is a very challenging future that I'm painting, and that the science is painting for the future. That's not ideally not where we would want to go.
You seem to be saying, Professor Behrens, that and Dr. Clarke, that what the UK research and policy aims to do in terms of improving the UK's food security is applicable around the world.
Absolutely. So there's a reason why I focus a lot on high-income countries. Is because, well, first of all, we struggle a lot in the UK with nature. We're the seventh most nature-depleted country in the world, and so we've got a lot to harness and benefits to harness ourselves. Such a transition would massively improve our productivity, would reduce the cost of the NHS. Some estimates sort of tens to even hundreds of billions of pounds a year. And all of these technologies are exportable overseas to upper, middle upper, and lower middle income countries. And this is exactly what the Danes are doing. And so the Danes have a plant-rich action plan where across the entire food supply chain, they're basically encouraging more plants. And so all the way from sort of educating chefs, from investments into new technologies and grants for science and innovation, and they're targeting massive amounts of exports. That's one of the reasons they're doing it.
Okay, all right. I'm interested to see how encouraging chefs in Newcastle to take up more plant-based options will be effective. It's a political decision as well as a scientific decision. Kit, I
just wanted to slightly disentangle some of the things you mentioned. So, obviously, the source of protein is going to be challenging over the next few decades, not just here but around the world. Are there any animal agriculture systems that rival plants for efficiency?
Ultimately, no.
Not even fish?
Fish have large problems with trawling for the amount of diesel that's required, and also sort of from an environmental perspective, the biodiversity impacts. Farmed fish has the issue of eutrophication of near inland waters. The only area that does have some possibility would be mussels, oysters, those sorts of products, which are generally sort of feeder filters and can be quite environmentally beneficial and also quite good for certain micronutrients as well.
What about land-based insect protein?
Insect protein so far is mostly used for feeding to animals, and so that's actually just increasing the inefficiency of the process. But ultimately, once you take some food and you put it through another organism, you have all the losses of keeping that organism alive, and in some way you're destroying some of the calories and proteins.
Yeah, and I just wondered if the same was true when you take into account the processing that's required at the other end, plant-based proteins and fats. So, as you will no doubt have gathered, there's a huge furore about the amount of industrial processing to produce seed oils, for example. Which is enormously energy intensive, and whether the full life cycle of getting from growth into taking into account that full cycle and energy requirement, whether it's quite so unequal.
So that's been taken into account, and these are very small when you compare the environmental impacts on the farm. So when we look across the sort of supply chain, you're talking about sort of just over a third on the farm, about a third through sort of land use change, and the remaining is everything. It's the other storage that might happen, the processing, the transport, the refrigeration of the supermarket, the cooking of it, etc., etc. I don't have the figures on hand for the specific processing processing plant, but believe it's around the order of sort of 10%, the same sort of amount as we might have for transportation.
You basically would say in shorthand that a vegetarian future is sort of inevitable.
I think it's inevitable one way or another, either by designing that future and harnessing all the benefits of it,
and being forced upon us by
these, because what we will tend to see, and this is more of my own opinion here rather than something that's been shown in the scientific literature yet, but the inflationary pressures on the animal system will come in two forms, both on the animals struggling in climate change and struggling in the heat, but also the feed required for those animals. So even if you're then putting in AC, for example, into barns, or if you're putting in cooling systems, it's all extra money and investment and assets, and that's just going to raise the prices. And so I think you'll see this differential increase between the animal prices and the plant prices. We've seen some of that already, but yeah.
Can I ask what you mean by precision breeding? I mean, people may know more than me, but how, when you say precision breeding, how artificial do you mean? Is that genetic manipulation? Is it just the old-fashioned finding a couple of animals that you fancy and putting them together? How far does precision breeding go in its sort of artificiality?
I think in the language that we'd be using these days, precision breeding is a highly complex and technical process, but it does speed up the finding two individuals and putting them together. So I would define precision breeding by using gene editing, which is the CRISPR-Cas9 technology. I think this committee has heard from Professor Christabel Wawe from the John Ennis Centre in the past as part of this programme, and it's artificial. I think we could debate that for the rest of the day. There was a big discussion.
Well, let's put non-naturally occurring.
Well, again, I think we push back on what naturally occurring means. Natural has a whole series of pejorative interpretations. But I think so where we are now with the regulation is in England certainly is that it would be an intervention that could have arisen naturally. We can change. We scientists can make very precise base pair changes at the level of the DNA, which is very targeted, very elegant, very precise, and very fast now. It's elegant technology, but it has sped up.
So working up to my wider question, which was here we are with a largely plant-based diet, which will involve, as far as I could tell, fairly intensive farming with crops that are manipulated in a laboratory to produce. And yet we're saying there's a biodiversity, natural world, soil health thing going on. But it feels to me as if we have for want of a better word, a kind of artificial food future coming that conflicts with this idea of we want a kind of natural environment in which we're eating lots of healthy food that's wonky vegetables and all the rest of it. How does that conflict work?
So the plant-rich shift actually opens up the space for that system, for that biodiversity, for that floodwater absorption, for carbon sequestration. So the reason is because the system currently takes up so amount of space of land. And so in the UK, for example, in our research, if we were to move to a mainly, a sort of a very plant-heavy diet, and I'm still talking a beef burger once every 2 weeks, chicken fillet once a week, half a sort of quarter of a pint of dairy a day, that's the sort of diet. If we were to shift from the current diet to that diet, we would spare an area almost the size of Scotland. We would reduce our emissions.
Yes. You might be, sorry to interrupt, because we're on limited time, but in order to make that, and part of our inquiry is about sustainable, in order to make that sustainable, we would be designing our agricultural products and systems in such a way to eliminate things that are naturally part of biodiversity. So, for example, insect predation upon plants, right? We're going to we'll be breeding plants that are, resistant to black fly, so that we can have a reliable rape oil crop.
But not at all, because what you've done is you've saved land such that you can use it in different ways. So if you want fully organic system, you can have that. So you can have any sort of bits of intercropping, multi-cropping, any sort of production system that you want that's incredibly biodiverse, much more biodiverse than the current systems, and you would still even more save land. And so the result would be actually a system that enables what you're talking about, which would be incredibly biodiverse and, as I say, very resilient. And it's because you've saved that land. And actually, under our modelling, if you were to do that, we'd become far more self-sufficient as well.
So what do you think is the resistance to this system that you're...
Well, so currently the resistance, there's two sort of main threads of resistance. First is, in any transition, some people win and some people lose. And so there's resistance from, it has to be said, mainly sort of the large-scale agri-businesses, because they don't want to see something like this, the Tysons, the Cargills. And, the research, and actually this is academic papers, have shown how they have sort of consistently misled and run campaigns to misinform the public. So that's one key side of it. And the other side of it is, of course, food is a very personal and cultural decision that people make every day. The one thing I would say about that is that food systems and food decisions have changed dramatically over years. They continue to change dramatically. And so, we may not have heard of avocados on toast 20 years ago, or quinoa 10 years ago. This was a country mostly eating turnips, and you can't even buy a turnip in the supermarket mostly nowadays.
Well, being told not to eat avocados now, because they're destroying the planet. So, Dr. Clarke, some of these big agri-tech companies, are they your members or not?
Some of them are, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And is that correct, what Professor Behrens is saying? They're misleading us.
I think it would be slightly disingenuous to imply in this forum and that it was in any way deliberate. I don't know the details. We can all remember back in 2000 where there was some very unfortunate things happened around genetic modification. So I would, with respect, push back a little bit about your use of the word manipulation and this slightly ideological positioning of precision breeding as being unnatural. I think we have to be very careful in that narrative because, yes,
what word
we
would
have
you
to
use
be.
Then?
I would use precision, targeted, defined. We know the end game that we want. When somebody is breeding a new plant, they know the end game that they're looking for. The tools of precision breeding enable a much more direct route to get to that end game. Now, there will be a lot that don't work. It's not that you just get up one morning and you make a precision bred variety of wheat that is resistant to everything. It doesn't work like that. Things still have to be tested. They have to be trialed. And so I'm nervous of a narrative that implies that there is, big business is somehow holding all the strings, because let's be clear, big business is actually the enabler of a lot of this technology being available to farmers.
I'm not science resistant, and I just wanted you to respond to what the professor had said.
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, I'm sure we will return to these issues which are raised. I'm going to ask George to
Thanks,
move
Chair.
on.
Morning, both. As you know, one of the themes of this committee is value for money and how we turn this 20 billion a year public R&D, small compared to China and the US, a lot of money for a nation that's struggling, how we turn that into industry, investment, growth, hope around the country. So I wanted to ask Belinda about the agri-tech sector in the UK. Three specific questions, really. One about data. We're trying to work out whether government knows or anyone knows in a key sector like this, what is the public R&D per year? How much private are we getting in alongside it? And the Secretary of State recently admirably said for her that is a key indicator of whether we're winning. Secondly, what is the adoption problem, really? I was at CropTech last week, and one hears a lot about, we're a brilliant incubator, just like in so many other sectors. But our agricultural industry here isn't big enough, healthy enough, investing enough to pull through. And we're really interested to know whether you think the problem is in Innovate UK, in the industry, where in that translation piece. And then thirdly, as a UK trade envoy, what is it we have to do to help these amazing companies to go global? As you know, the global leaders traditionally in investment in R&D are Brazil and Netherlands. And I was trying to look at the data, perhaps you can help us. When I started in 2010, we were at 231 million a year in agricultural research. In 2020, it was 306. We got it up. Other departments spend quite a lot. I think it's about 400 total, but no one really knows in the industry which pots. And I read that we're fourth in agricultural private investment. But that might just be because we have Syngenta, the world's #1 plant health company based here. So And I read we've secured 12.5 billion in private investment since 2014. Amazing. But can you help us? How should we think about this as a sector and those structural challenges, starting with the data? Have you got any adoption, and how we help it go global?
Yeah. So data, and I know you. This is close to your heart, George. Data governance remains challenging, not just in the UK but globally, and where you've got international supply chains as well. I think it's fair to say that's still a work in progress. Farm Data Principles, if you haven't come across that, is a programme that is an industry-led, industry-driven initiative to try and bring some rigour and governance around data. What we're still lacking is a unified data architecture, and that is...
Thank you. Just on government expenditure, because we've had ministers and folk in here. Do you know what the UK agri research per year or over this next CSR figure is?
I don't, and I would just be careful about us putting too many barriers around Agri-techE. So as a slightly semantic point, if we're going to talk about the Agri-techE sector, I understand why we define it thus within government. It does mean that we risk undervaluing it, because we have technologies from other sectors. If we're only going to talk about those that are the traditional, Syngenta, BASF, Bayer, those organisations, who knew that some of the big aerospace companies have agronomists, for example? They would in no way describe themselves as agri-tech companies, but they are active in agriculture. So I do think we are in danger of under-reporting in terms of the scale of the sector.
I understand. As a trade envoy, I do need to be able to say to people, you may not know this, but in the UK we spend 200, 300, 400 million a year on agri-food related research, and we pull in $1 billion, 1.5, 2 billion. Just even rough numbers would be helpful. And it's interesting how many government officials don't have those numbers, and you would know them if they were out there. I think so.
I agree. No, well, that's a question we're constantly asked by government colleagues. Can we come up with the numbers? And I think because there are these sort of slightly fuzzy edges, and it's not a case where we can just define the 20 companies and the 5 research organisations that are working in this space and just add them up. It's got some very blurred edges.
And a Whitehall question. Can I ask which department for you leads on Agri-techE? Because when I was at DCIP, people said to me, we don't do Agri-techE, although we funded all the research. DEFRA, DBT, who is owning this as an industry in Whitehall?
Yeah, well, obviously the ADOPT programme sits with DEFRA. I think it's very notable, and Minette Batters noted this in her recent farming profitability review, that farming businesses sit within DEFRA, other businesses sit within DBT. So we already have this disconnect between the enabling technology providers and the end users, and that leads to all sorts of under-reporting problems. So personally, I would go back to the original Agri-techE strategy, where this was a collaboration between different names for different departments around international development, trade, business and DEFRA. But that would be, to your original question, Chair, that would be the farming system that I would like to be supported in the UK in 2050, that we have this, and it helps the fact that we have Agri-techE as one of the frontier sectors in the industrial strategy. It helps. I think we're still hoping and expecting to see some impact from that. George, your question about the adoption challenge, it is many. We have a fragmented system. I noticed that the National Farmers Union report of last year around innovation and investment revisited the conversation about a What Works Centre for agriculture. This has been a conversation that's been going for many years, and very many people are finding it hard to disagree with having a triaged system, almost like NICE for the NHS, where farmers can actually get, independent advice about literally what works on their farm. And to your point about adoption and scaling, farmers are waiting to be sold to by technology providers, so they don't have that independent voice, that independent advice. And then the companies themselves are struggling to scale, which is a whole different conversation. Yeah,
I should say, as chair of the all-party group for Agri-techE and a Mid-Norfolk MP, I see a lot, and colleagues who haven't, I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. In my day, a tractor cab when I worked on a farm was a canvas thing with a piece of plastic window and a go fast, slow. They look like airline cockpits these days. I mean, they're incredibly high tech. You have, AI, satellite-guided bits that work out which bit of the field needs spraying. All the data is automatically captured, fed back to your desktop agronomy. So it's not like there's a technology shortage. It seems to me there's an extraordinary wave of technology. Our farmers, when they can afford it, are using it. It feels like the problem is more upstream, that somewhere in government or in the agricultural sector globally, people aren't looking at the UK and going, what an amazing integrator of everything from gene editing to data, let's globalize it. So what do you think those structural barriers are, and how can we help?
Again, if you look internationally at our colleagues overseas, particularly New Zealand, the Netherlands, they have a very structured, very energetic and activities around going out to the rest of the world, forging those partnerships, waving the flags for what their market has to offer. For example, in the Middle East, where vertical farming is a very hot topic at the moment, there are providers out there every week, and they are saying, what can we do? How can we make this work? I think we need a more concerted effort for the UK on a global stage. We have also the real potential for UK PLC to be the global test bed for new technologies. Yes. We have different soils, we have innovative farmers, we have ways in which the UK is already punching above its weight in its earlier stage R&D. We need to be able to pull that investment in, and we also need to export the technologies, and part of that is enabling our emerging and growing agri-tech companies to scale, and they are really struggling.
Okay. My last question is just on that, on Innovate UK. We've had Tom, the new CEO, in. Any advice for us on what we should be pushing Innovate to do to help tackle this problem? Because it's really their job rather than the...
It is.
I mean, we're spending a lot of money on research. The challenge is innovation. Any suggestions for how we help?
And it's hard to think of how Innovate could do things differently. It's easy to think of ways of criticising, because what's happening now is that there are a lot of companies who are good at writing the grant proposal that are getting funded. I think we do need, this is a conversation with UKRI, with Innovate UK and BBSRC, and I would also bring EPSRC into this conversation. We know that there is a balance between the fundamental research that's so important and that has underpinned a lot of UK's activity, and the applied research, and then how Innovate UK helps to develop that. I think what I would advocate, and I know this goes against a lot of Haldane and all sorts of things, we need sector missions, we need sector plans, and then from that understanding the size of the prize for our agricultural outputs, whether it's retail, whether it's out of home, whether it's export, whether it's government procurement, the size of the prize, and from that training, research, innovation, all
the good news, my successor, Patrick Vallance, has actually, in my view, admirably set out 3 principles. There's blue sky, that is there to win prizes, be world class. There's R&D that drives growth, and there's strategic, sovereign, international geopolitical security investment. So the Haldane principle is being, in my view, rightly rewritten, really. So I think the door is open for the agri-tech sector to make that case.
Absolutely.
Thank you. G.
Yeah, thank you very much, George. Adam.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Good morning, both. Thanks for joining us. Following on from the discussion you were just having with George, actually, looking at the international picture and the innovation picture, Belinda first, but then I'll ask Paul too. Do you think there are any particular lessons that we can learn from the international picture when we're talking about innovation ecosystems?
I'm very persuaded by the model in Australia, where they have groups who get together. It's bringing together the industry and the research and government as well, talking together about what the industry challenge are. It comes back to the mission-led R&D. And it's very hard to argue against that. They have these CRCs, forgive me, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but they have them across a number of agricultural outputs, plants, livestock, including even niche crops, and I think they've got one for precision production as well, precision fermentation. And that is where you get the right people in the room together, deciding the research that needs to be done. Now, in the UK, we've had some examples of that. BBSRC would run research and technology clubs, which were, again, bringing the industry together, setting the challenges, and then defining what the research needs were, and then academics would bid into that. I'm persuaded by that model. I think Australia, not necessarily perfect, not necessarily entirely cookie cutter for the UK, but setting that North Star of what we want to achieve, and everything else falls under that.
Is there any innovations further to that Australian model that you know, let's say we were going to port that over here, anything you'd change from there?
Obviously, context is everything. We're looking at much smaller geographical markets. But I suppose if there's a criticism, because of the scale of the country and the market, it's difficult for some of those to work together. And again, AHDB came together to try and reduce the silos between the different subsectors within agriculture. It's hard to do that as you're getting big and you've got very many of those. In the UK, we'd be very well placed to be able to have those much more leaky silos between the innovation pieces for beef and pork, dairy, and even across to crops.
Thanks, Belinda. Paul, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you. First, I just want to clarify what I meant earlier about the vested interests. Largely, these are US and Brazilian interests that are providing the misinformation. So it's sort of JBSs and the industry associations there surrounding meat, just to clarify that, rather than some of the crops industries. So in terms of the countries that do this well, I mean, the Dutch horticultural sector, extremely science and innovation dependent, extremely developed. There's no reason why we couldn't have something similar here. This is sort of a national strategic output of how they've actually driven that through the years. And the other key one is the Danish plan. They have a unity of purpose now around eating more plants. They don't mention anything about reducing meat. It's not about reducing meat. It's about eating more plants. And they are putting hundreds of millions of euros into developing that unity of purpose towards that outcome. And as a country that is experiencing, is at the sharp end, I would say, existential angst around climate change and environmental problems, that's where they sort of looked at. And as I say, the sort of investment into 15 high-protein crops identified as suitable for Danish climate, investment into seaweed, some of the blue foods that was just mentioned, investment into facilities and shared facilities that people can experiment in and develop in. And so I think that's a really good example. The Swiss are now sort of developing their own nutrition action plan, which is starting to look very similar as well.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And going back to some of the points you made earlier that I was interested in as well, I think you advocated really for a kind of global move to a vegetarian diet. But then you mentioned a few minutes later that there was a possibility that it could be a beef burger a fortnight and a piece of chicken a week. Just wanted to clarify that point. Do you think there is a sustainable future where everybody on the planet is still eating a bit of meat, but much less than they are now? Or do you really think that a vegetarian globe is inevitable?
Absolutely. To be clear, I don't advocate for a vegetarian diet even. I'm advocating for reductions. And so there is a scope for having animals in the mix of agriculture. It's just that there has to be much less than it is today. And where that scope is varies across the scientific literature. The most that I've seen is something like a sort of 30% reduction across Europe. The least that I've seen in terms of reduction is 40%, and then the most I've seen is 75%, 80% reductions. I mean, and you can go down lower, even lower if you want to, from a health and environmental perspective.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that, Paul. I really appreciate that. I want to look at the farming profitability review as well. So, Belinda, I think the review found that in the UK too much funding went into research that wasn't aligned with business needs, was their conclusion, or it doesn't necessarily have practical application. Is that something you agree with?
Certainly the feedback that we're having from farmers and end users is yes. Do I agree with it? So I used to sit on the council of BBSLC, and it's a constant conversation about the balance and who decides what research is done. But I think it is becoming clear that, again, going back to the mission idea, we have to have, and what's been going on with AHDB as well, so the levy board there was a vote, so there is now no R&D that's funded by the levy board into potatoes and horticulture. That's leaving a vacuum. So I think we are looking at a change in the way that research is mandated, funded, and the research that is done. There's a different conversation about who decides and how that meets the needs of industry and business and addresses the growth agenda.
Okay. Thanks, Belinda. I mean, touching as well on the point George made a few minutes ago, particularly focused on Minister Valence's renewed interest in blue sky, shall we say. Do you think if we focused completely on sort of profitable research, as it were, is there a risk there that agricultural research leaves behind some areas because they aren't likely to be profitable, even though they could be in the future? Do you think that's a problem? And if it is, how might we address that?
Absolutely. I think that's a major risk. And that's one of the things that the UK's excellence upon which it was predicated was our absolutely excellent research base and punching above our weight. So I think agricultural research has always been the slightly poorer relation than medical research for reasons I think we probably all understand. And again, the importance of that fundamental research being continually, that engine, that pipeline still being fed, I think is absolutely critical. There is a balance to be struck with ensuring that there is also application and demonstration of impact of that research in a way that taxpayers are seeing the return on the investment, and that the conclusion is not just we need more research.
Sure. How can we as legislators ensure that balance is correct?
I think we need a different system for mandating and deciding what research is done, and it shouldn't be based on who can fill in a proposal the most effectively. So again, sorry to be so boring about sector missions, but the sector mission, I think, gives us the envelope within which you then start to have all those conversations about, well, within the lamb sector, what are the priorities? When George Freeman is going around the world as the trade envoy, talking to people about apples and pears in India, as was mentioned in the Batters review, what tools can we give the trade envoy based on the research that has been done in order to support that agenda? So I think it needs to be more strategic, more joined up. These are slight buzzwords, I'm conscious of that. But this isn't rocket science.
Thank you both. I think Lauren might want to comment.
Yes, I'll just ask. Yes. I'll let, before we move on to Alison. Yes.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that. So at the moment, to apply for grants, it's writing a report, a proposal. What would be the alternative to doing that?
Yes, golly. I think there has to be some justification, obviously, of the business case of why you're the best research group or the best company to do that piece of work. So there does have to be an application process, of course there does, and there does have to be ongoing monitoring. The review process and the assessment process is not perfect. I don't wish to, necessarily throw darts at any particular organisation, but reviewers tend not always to be briefed as well as they could be, and having the expert knowledge and understanding the drivers. Why are we funding this piece of research? Is it because it's very interesting fundamental research, or is it because farmers in Norfolk are going to be really keen to see it happen? So I know that the funding agencies have experimented with different ways of asking people to apply for funding, with videos, with all sorts of alternatives. I think without a more strategic direction of travel as to what good looks like, it's quite difficult to just sort of come up with alternative mechanisms.
What do you think, Paul?
Of the grant at...
Mechanism, yeah.
So I think ultimately we have a lot of costs in producing and sort of going through the grant process. I think there are models for example, in New Zealand, where you have two-stage processes, three-stage processes, where you put down your thoughts in a sort of more in a briefer context. Which then allows for a quick filtering process, and then you can move towards more in depth. I think that this difficulty with the blue sky and deployment. I mean, I do think we need both, of course. We can't underestimate the importance of some of the blue sky research, and for example, things like nitrogen-fixing cereals, cereals that are going to be more resistant to climate change, even some of the photosynthetic efficiency improvements of crops. But then one other area I would just sort of like to highlight is, in the energy system, we essentially saw technologies come back down in cost, and innovations continue and accelerate through deployment.
Yes.
And so once we're at the stage where we can start to deploying things, we should deploy and learn through deploying.
Yes.
And that then brings up questions about farmers' capacities to actually afford these technologies, their bandwidth to take on more debt to finance them.
which are questions partially for Innovate UK, as well as perhaps for the Treasury and maybe even the British Wealth Fund. But right, so thank you very much. And we're over time, but we have some important subjects to go on. So I hope we can continue for say another 10 minutes. And I'm going to bring in Alison now.
Quite a long list of potential questions, so I'm going to try and bring it down quite neatly. In the evidence that we've received, they have obviously clearly outlined the many benefits that AI and digital tools can give to the agricultural system. I found it quite interesting that we had quite a significant amount of evidence regarding the risks and the concerns around that. So for some, for example, big ag dominance, would farmers lose control, smaller farmers lose control of their data. Issues such as that. And even with the World Bank's agricultural global practice, they raised the issue dependent on data quality with AI, as it always is, and availability, and that not every agricultural challenge requires AI, and that sometimes simpler solutions should be considered. So balancing the benefits and the risks as in your responses. When we talk about AI and digital technologies transforming agriculture, what does this mean in practice?
I pick that one up first. So the Oxford Farming Conference last week, the debate was that in 90 years, farming will be a one-day-a-week job thanks to AI and digital tools. They lost the motion, but it brought out a lot of these issues. The data analytics, you're right, it's not yet consistent enough to be able to be reliable. AI is not yet where we would like it to be. I do think, however, that the thinking is now that AI will enhance the human input, not necessarily replace completely, but will be an enhancement. It will increase the efficiency. It will give new insights. There's a lovely example in America of some strawberry growers who were using AI weather data, and the AI came up with an insight that no agronomist could understand what it was doing, and it had actually taken into account wind speed. Now, the agronomists, the human, would have had no sense of what that was, but on looking into it, it was affecting pollination rates. So I think, as ever with new technologies comes new risks and new responsibilities, and that is something that I don't know how one would legislate for that, but I can see that with using AI for machine vision, for robotics, for understanding, for precision agriculture, better inputs, designing new crop inputs from the ground up, AI is going to transform our industry, and it may be something that we just have to kind of work out the way that we do this responsibly.
Well, how we work out to do it responsibly. We've seen AI used in other sectors, and there is plenty of evidence how we can establish ethical frameworks and legal frameworks to support that. So a question that I wouldn't mind asking is, what financial regulation governance mechanism will be able to deliver the benefits of agricultural innovation, and how would this be managed? And particularly in trying to balance small and medium-sized farms against the bigger corporations as well, to make sure we have that balance of power.
I think the whole data governance and AI, you would need an expert on that, somebody from farm data principles. I think that's a bit beyond my zone of expertise to answer effectively.
You nodded. Do you have a comment on that?
I mean, I would just add that really AI and we're mostly talking about machine learning that's happening on the fields here, and this is a data issue, and running the machine learning algorithms is not sort of a very advanced thing to be able to do. So, but what is important is the data. So where a lot of this concern comes about is the hogging of data, which allows for these models to be sort of produced. So if there are sort of cooperatives for data holding, if there's regulation and legislation about how farm data is kept, how it is pooled, because it's the pooling of the data across multiple farms, which is important because you need a lot of data, then these are ways in which we could encourage the innovation of the system so that data is more available across multiple different groups, and then you're not looking at sort of concentration that a lot of people are worried about.
And that's a really good example of the FAIR principle principles, which is findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable. There's different type of FAIR principles as an AI ethicist I'm used to. Because we've, and I'm conscious of time, Chair, but because we've touched on funding and how we can scale up, and as well as protecting the farmers and the food producers. I noticed in CropLife's submission that they said that the funding system for startups to develop these technologies favours proprietary subscription-based solutions, and that regulation in this space is required. Now, I don't quite understand, is that a negative? And again, going back to this, I worry about vendor lock-in and big farm, corporations locking in smaller businesses via these systems. So could you comment on that funding system?
And I think it is. So Innovate UK funding does require, as part of its assessment process, what is your proprietary protection for your technology, your innovation. So it is considered to be a benefit when it comes to public funding. The companies that we work with who have private funding, there is a move now that the investors have been very keen on subscription models, because subscriptions generate revenue. That is now starting to get some pushback from the farmers, who are saying, actually, we don't want more subscription models. The data sharing, the data trust, we're not there yet. I'm quite excited about what the potential for distributed ledger technology and blockchain could be. We had some examples of this with Unilever and the tea industry in Malawi. I think it was 2017. So there is the potential to be able to use data, technology, blockchain much more effectively. Farm data principles, I think, has made great progress in a number of over a relatively short space of time, but they're struggling to gain widespread industry traction. Again, if that was mandated, that would help.
I'm going to leave it at that in the interest of time, Chair. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Alison.
Thank you very much.
Can I just clarify, Dr. Belinda Clarke, on your responses? You are advocating the widespread take-up in this country and globally of AI and digital technologies.
I am.
But your organisation does not have a position on how to make that ethical and fair.
Right. We're an independent, not-for-profit membership organisation. We're not a lobbyist. I have opinions, but that's not part of our mandate as the company that I run.
Thank you. Martin.
Thank you very much. So bring it all round in a circle, thinking about climate change and sustainability. We talk about big fields. I'm imagining this massive field in Norfolk with the Starship Enterprise going around, sort of the tractor cabs feeling like the Starship Enterprise when you get into them. And I'm visiting small farmers in Devon who are struggling on a day-to-day basis, and I'm hearing of yields and crop failures, and the yield this year being the worst ever, and all the rest of it, with climate wet parts of the year when it shouldn't be wet, and summer's too hot. Are we making enough difference on the ground fast enough to actually have our farming industry survive beyond the big boys with massive bucks who can have the Starship Enterprise in Norfolk?
Who's that for?
Both of you.
I think that's a very good question. I think that ultimately we're not moving fast enough. Climate change is moving fast and outpacing our ability to cope with this and to help people deal with these changes. And so we know that the adaptation plans that the CCC, the Climate Change Committee, came up with are only partially implemented. Those adaptation plans are extremely important for farmers, like you've just mentioned, and we're really not giving farmers as many options as we possibly could, given the way in which we know the food system will have to change over the next few years because of not just climate change but also biodiversity loss. And as I mentioned, this land use issue, we currently can't make many of the targets for land, for biodiversity, for the assumptions that we're going to be able to draw down carbon using bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, because we simply don't have the land for it. And so again, it comes back to this question. And in my view, what should eventually be happening is that farmers would just have a greater diversity of options of how they would like to engage in this new world, this world that's being shaped by the climate change which is being sort of brought upon us.
I would agree the rate of adoption is not fast enough, but I don't think the scenario that you paint for the future is entirely addressable through adoption of technology. There's a lot of other issues around land ownership, around land availability. So giving small farmers access to all the technology they need is not necessarily going to mitigate against the scenario that you discuss. But I would say we need to be much better at adoption. I would pay tribute to the Farming Innovation Programme that I think has been quite a visionary way of bringing technology to farmers, the Farming Equipment Technology Fund. It is clear that government has heard the need and importance of upskilling farmers in their availability of technology. But the second part of your question, I think, is a slight non sequitur around availability of tech.
Okay. So what do we need to do?
To
move forward to save our farming, to actually have a viable industry that's adopting tech sufficiently and is doing things in the right way so that we are surviving. In Cornwall, we've just seen the most devastating storm in a long, long while. The rest of the country seems to have largely ignored it. Cornwall was ripped apart. Right now, bits of my house are falling off with the winds. I've just had a video from my daughter. Bits of my house are falling off because the wind is blowing so hard in Devon. Who would guess it from London?
In Norfolk, we're having field fires and flooding. So even in Norfolk, look at water projections. 4 of my main towns are projected to be largely underwater in 2050. We have some dire projections going forwards, and if we don't move farming quicker now, so what do we do to move it?
Great. You sound like you're about to say
something. Could I?
So,
just to give one particular vision, I'm sure there's lots of different visions that would work for the future here, but just to give one. By 2050, we have shifted towards healthier diets for ourselves. It doesn't mean vegetarian or vegan or any of these things. It just means more plants. We have saved a large amount of land, and that land now is producing food in very environmentally sustainable ways, organically, all the different ways you might want to implement food change. We've got less but better meat, and that is able to absorb the damage from climate change, because we know that natural lands around these farming lands are better able to absorb the floodwater risk, which is the biggest risk that we have in the UK, more drought resilient, etc. Now those fields can then be productive. On the side of that, we also then have the science and technology coming in. We have precision fermentation, which is in controlled environment agriculture, which is less risky in terms of climate change. We've got some vertical farming, which is producing micronutrients. And we've got a system where, if we need it, because we have an acute food crisis, we could even start thinking about using fermentation or other facilities across the UK, say in breweries or other infrastructure, to produce further food if we need it in that year. And so in this very scary future where we're looking at these climate impacts, you've got actually a resilient agricultural system across the UK. Now that's one vision, and you could make all sorts of disagreements with that, but that's one way in which you could try and make things work.
I would also go back to what future do we want. So if we're looking forwards to 2050, is the expectation that everyone who's farming now will continue to be farming? Because I think that might be a flawed vision, that there will be some who will be leaving the industry, and that's probably right and proper and appropriate. Those who want to stay in the industry obviously need to be supported to be as productive and as environmentally sustainable as they possibly can. Public money for public goods has a really key role in this conversation, but I think we need to start with what the vision of the food system is, and then see where farming and land use management sits underneath that. We obviously need to support the industry we have, but within the context of the vision that, as a nation, we want and expect to have.
Well, that is, thank you, Martin. That is concerning comments with regard to for example, the employment within farming. Can I just, we'll let you go in a moment, just to sort of crystallise that. Currently, the UK produces 75% of our own food. Can you say in 2050, what estimate of our food security would you make?
I think it has dropped to 68, was it not, in the Batters review most recently? I think it's 68, so it is dropping.
Right.
Look, I don't think it's for me to say what I think it should be for
You said
the
we want
UK.
to set out our future, where we want to get to. Where would you like to see us get to?
In terms of the proportion of UK domestic food production, I would like it to be higher, absolutely. I would like the farmers that are farming to be producing more food in line with the outputs from the 30-50-50 vision. So we do absolutely need those who are farming to be as productive as they possibly can. There's a farm opposite my house, they had a ton an acre.
So higher than it is now.
Yes, absolutely.
And
using the tools that we've been hearing about.
Have you a figure for me?
Yeah, so I think, again, it's hard to put a figure on these things because we're working global markets, but higher. The other thing that I would mention is that food stockpiles in the UK, I mean, we have perhaps 2 to 3 weeks. In Finland, for example, they now have 9 months.
I think you did say that we should be having half a beef burger a week, but you can't say what you think our food security should be.
Well, I mean, you could say it'd be 100%. I mean, that is one option that we can have. I mean, but there are costs that come with that economically, and so socially. And socially.
Okay, listen, thank you. We have overrun. It's been fascinating listening to your vision for the agri-future and how science will play its role. Thank you very much for your contribution today. Order. And welcome to the second panel in a Select Committee session on science and global food security. And we are joined by 2 new witnesses, and I shall ask them to introduce themselves when they respond to the first question that is asked of them. And I'm going to go to Lauren for the first question.
Lovely, thank you, Chair, and thank you both for joining us today. We're really looking to try to understand experiences and views on tech in farming. So firstly, can you briefly introduce yourselves, the work that you do, and tell us about any emerging technologies that you think are having a big impact on the farms that you work with? So I'll go to the people in the room first, and then I'll come over to you. Thank you, Peter. Over to you, Tom.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a huge privilege to come here to represent my members. So I'm a farmer in Oxfordshire. I also lead the British On-Farm Innovation Network. We're a network, we've got about 3,500 members of about 800 who are pioneering farmers. We're also involved in 5 farming innovation programme projects, major projects, 4 of which we're leading. So we've got about 100 farmers now, almost 100 farmers who are doing on-farm research as part of those projects. So 2 areas that I think are really exciting that we can lead on here in the UK are precision breeding and AI. And precision breeding in particular, thank you very much, by the way, for the enabling legislation that you helped get through with the Genetic Technologies Bill. It's a fantastic piece of legislation, and it enables us to bring that technology out of the glasshouse and into the field. You had Cristobal to talk to you previously. The work that his lab is doing is absolutely mind-blowing in terms of the physiological aspects of wheat that they're manipulating and what they can do in those labs. And I've been to see his technology. I've talked to Cristobal, and I just go slack-jawed in amazement at what I see. I want that technology on my farm, and so do our farmers. And just to introduce you to our farmers, they are pioneers. So they're not just ordinary farmers, they're pioneers. They are enthusiastic and they're curious about new technology and how that works on farm. And it's not necessarily answering your question, Lauren, but...
Could you answer the question? Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
I love your
enthusiasm,
but we are running out, we are short on time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so it's the physiological traits that I think are really exciting, and the precision breeding, you can really get to some exciting changes that can happen. We really need to see how those work on farm. And the other aspect of that is the traits that relate to the soil. So, for example, there's some really good work going on at the Crop Science Centre, looking at the relationship between plants and arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. And our members are so enthused about what's going on in the soil. We know so little about it. And we now have the opportunity, with the new technology that's coming forward, to understand so much more. And that's what's valuable. Can I talk about AI?
Briefly.
Yes, so we heard quite a bit about AI previously, and it's been estimated, by the way, that there's something like 10 million trillion different combinations of decisions that need to be made to take a food product from seed to supermarket shelf. And farmers are responsible for quite a large part of that. There is no way a farmer can make the right decision in every aspect in order to get the most nutritious, healthy, environmentally friendly and so on food to market. AI can be so empowering in enabling those decisions to be made. So our farmers are gathering a wealth of data on their farms. And the big thing that comes back to us is, so what? They need that data interpreted. And at the moment, the only way they can do that is through experts, through agronomists and so on. And that's time-consuming and expensive. But the opportunities with AI is to automate that and make a lot of those decisions easy and empowering and so on. That's where the opportunity lies. Obviously, it's a nascent technology at the moment, but there is so much opportunity to empower farmers through AI.
Very exciting. Peter, have you got some other very exciting things that are happening in...
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter. I work for CIMMYT. CIMMYT is the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center. We work on maize, wheat, and then the dryland crops like sorghum and millets. I'm based in Zambia. I work with the smallholder farmers. What has been really exciting in our area is really developing those drought-tolerant crops. For example, maize, which is really a staple food, and also building some of the resistance, especially for diseases. We've been fighting new pests, for example, fall armyworm. That pest really came from South America into Africa and has been moving. It's only recently that we had a breakthrough that at least we do have some tolerant varieties, although they are not 100% tolerant, but they reduce the use of pesticides and so forth. And also in terms of drought, we found that our varieties that we have developed, when we had an El Nino 2 years back, they were able to give farmers at least 30% yield compared to the other varieties that were in the market. And based on that, they were able to, to at least give more food to the smallholder farmers that we work with. And as CIMMYT and CGR, I mean, there have been a lot of innovation, especially when it comes to some of the gene editing, so that we can quickly develop varieties that are disease-resistant, pest-resistant, and also to improve nutrition. So those are just some of the few exciting things that we are doing. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Peter. So thinking in the next 10 years, and I suppose this new technologies that you've both described there are moving incredibly quickly. Are you most excited about the AI prospect, or is it the precision? Is there anything else that you're most excited about in the next 10 years?
Well, I think just reining back a little bit, the one thing that I would like to see greater recognition for is the role of the pioneering farmer within this. So, everyone talks about productivity growth is very sluggish and so on, and that farmers don't take on new technology. It's not that they don't take on new technology, but it's a big step for them to make a productivity, to make a change in their system. And you don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. It's the role of the pioneering farmer to introduce that. But that role is not recognised, and that is the single biggest problem that we've got in terms of getting new technology onto farm. And Peter will agree with me on this, that farmers learn best from other farmers. Yeah. So this making a productivity change, if they can see it working well on another farmer, they go, okay, I'll try that on my farm. And that is there's so much research to back that up. Yeah. But you still need those first farmers to make that step. And that's the thing, and that's not recognised. There's no first mover advantage in farming. There's no incentive for those farmers to make that initial change. That is the change we need to make over the next 10 years, to recognise the role of those farmers, those pioneering farmers, and go a step further as well. Let's involve them in the fundamental research towards those technologies. So let's look at precision breeding, for example. Rather than waiting until there is a product on the market before you introduce it to farmers, involve them in the trait development of those precision bred crops. That's what we're doing in 2 of our projects, and our farmers are really looking forward to getting precision bred crops on their farm.
Wicked. So when you're talking about pioneering farmers being that recognition, what sort of other support, or what would you, in an ideal world, want to see supporting those pioneer farmers? Well,
first of all, funding. It goes without saying. So one of the things that we have done very much, no one really pays farmers to do on-farm research. It's not a recognised thing. And in fact, people have said to my face, farmers can't do research. I can tell you they can do research. We do it. We do it successfully. And they do it far more, in some respects, far more effectively and far more efficiently than professional trials technicians. So that should be recognised. And it's actually, to be fair, government has recognised that. So the Farming Innovation Programme, farmers are now being paid to do on-farm research through our projects. There's also the Adopt Fund as well. It's also giving them that sense of purpose as well, that they are delivering a common good, a public benefit and a common good. And I would say to the people in this room, it's your role. You can do that. It's your gift to do that. One thing that we've struggled with on our projects is, although DEFRA fund them to a large extent, actually getting DEFRA involved in the projects. We've got a conference next week, for example, and we have struggled to get anyone from DEFRA to come to that conference, which I think is a real shame. And it's
sure we'll make sure that they get that message. Yes.
But what I'd also say is I would love all of you. You've all got constituents in your who are doing on-farm research. I can put you in touch with a farmer to bring them to bring you onto their farm to see the work that they're doing.
That's amazing. And just sort of last question to you, Peter, if I can. So, speaking of, between different farmers and looking at the mobile and digital technologies, what role is that having in Zambia?
Okay, I mean, here we have to realize that for example, in where we are, we have commercial farmers who have access to extension. They have internet. Then we have smallholder farmers who don't have smartphones, who don't have the technologies that farmers in the developed world have. But slowly we have been moving where we are now using mobile phone, for example, not a smartphone, but messaging.
Yes.
For example, now we have been sending messages to smallholder farmers where they can use their mobile phone, for example, to access markets. They can get information on early warning systems, for example, to really tell them what is the weather like. And using some of that mobile technologies during certain time of the year, the farmer can dial in, or the farmer can dial in, and through that, the farmer can have different options. For example, if he dials a certain number, that certain number is okay, which area are you in? What varieties are you interested in? What is the area? And based on that, we can use some of those mobile technologies to give farmers information about variety choices, about fertilizer choices, and so forth, based on the area that they are based in.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Peter. Back to you, Chi.
Thank you very much, and apologies for my mobile phone, which was actually on Do Not Disturb, but obviously knows something that I don't about the caller. But just to follow up on that, on Lauren's questions, I think it's fair to say that we heard a very rosy picture of the contribution of technology, both precision breeding and AI, to food security in the UK and globally. And particularly we heard of how mobile technology is making such a difference in Africa. Could you eat both? And I'll come to you first, Peter Setimela. Could you say what barriers, what are the key barriers? I'd say 3 key barriers for farmers adopting precision breeding and AI.
Yeah, basically one of the barriers is the information, because some of the farmers, they don't have information, they don't have smartphones, or they don't have that income for them to access AI, like where in the other areas where you have a big commercial farmers. But for example, the commercial farmers can access some of the AI. For example, when you talk of precision agriculture, when you talk of fertilizer, and some of those barriers is just more to do with the gender. Some of those we find that within a household, you only have one person with a mobile phone, or you only have one person with a smartphone. So sharing of that mobile technologies, data also is quite expensive in some of the areas in Africa. You find that there's that limitation in terms of the data to be used to get to that.
Right. Just following up on that, we haven't heard very much from the previous panel with regard to issues around, for example, soil health and sustainable fertilizer. Do you find, Peter Setimela, that you can encourage greater productivity in areas like soil health through innovation or technologies, and what kind of innovation and technologies are they?
Yes, I mean, thank you for that question. That's a very important question. For example, in Zambia, they have a subsidy program where they were giving farmers a fertilizer. But it did not matter which part of Zambia you were from. For example, if they're saying, okay, each farmer gets two bags of fertilizer, then that recommendation is a blanket recommendation across the whole country. But now with AI and with a bit of technology, you can have very simple tools that you can use to identify the amount of fertilizer that is required in a certain area. So at least slowly, farmers are having access to that, where they can get information about their field much quicker. Before, it used to take almost 3 months for a farmer, once he do a soil sample, send that soil sample to the lab. Then by the time the results come back, it's already too late for the farmer to use that information. But now with AI and with collaboration with other institutes, now farmers can slowly have access to that information where they can get the results very quickly and use that information.
Thank you. That seems like an excellent example of a low-tech application of a high-tech service, AI, to provide the support for farmers, which doesn't involve, what did you call it, Martin? Having a spaceship in your fields. Thank you for that. Tom, Alan Stevens, just a couple of key barriers to adoption of technology.
Yeah, well, first of all, on precision breeding, for example. So one of the things that we're doing within one of our projects is trying to find out farmers' views on precision breeding. And interestingly enough, no one's actually bothered to find out how farmers feel. There's been no research done. The only surveys that have been done on it are what we've done previously. Right. So we know pretty well how our farmers feel about precision breeding. And the nervousness about it is naturally about market. Are they going to be restricted from supplying the market? Is there going to be, the GM issue and so on around it, which is currently still very, very relevant. But actually engaging them in precision breeding is really tough. So we are trying to engage our farmers and engage all farmers in the discussion to put their views forward on precision breeding. They don't feel part of the conversation at the moment.
Okay, so that's one of the barriers to taking it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Samantha.
Thank you, Chair. We had an incredible session before your panel, but also slightly scary in parts, talking about the reduction of land and the fact that we have to use technology in a very clever way. And so I want to talk about how government can support farmers. And you've mentioned already, Tom, the Farming Innovation Programme. But it's a slightly loaded question, I suppose. I have some incredible farmers in my constituency of South Derbyshire, and I have one farmer in particular, John Davison, who farms potatoes for Walkers. He's diversified into chicken farming and has an AD plant himself. And one of the things he said is technology is so important for farmers, but the ability to adopt isn't made easy. And actually, when you listen to some of my colleagues in the previous session, we were talking about how can we make sure farmers are at the centre of this. This is a lifestyle. The farmers have farmed for generations, but then we have the likes of Dyson, who has thousands and thousands of acres of land and really looks at farming more as an extension of manufacturing versus farming. What do you think some of the risks are to farmers with technology and lack of ability to adopt technology, not least because of cost and because of some of the things that you've highlighted already, Tom, around the fact that you need pioneer farmers. We've got pioneer farmers, it's just not recognised by government. So it's a rather long way of asking you, are there sufficient incentives in the UK for farmers to adopt innovative technologies? And how can we make sure technology doesn't end our farmers?
Well, first of all, the ADOPT programme that has been introduced, it really is a fantastic programme. It's got to be, there are one or two teething problems with it that need to be sorted out, but actually it's really, really good. And one of the reasons it's good, by the way, is because DEFRA sat down with the Farmer-Led Innovation Network, of which BOFIN is a part, and they co-created ADOPT with us. When they introduced it and launched it, we were just so surprised that they had actually taken on board all of our recommendations. So that's a really good way, and that puts the farmer right at the centre of a research programme. So answers the first part of your question. By the way, Dyson farming, don't dismiss what they do. They do some incredible research on behalf of all farming, and they've now got their own research farm. I mean, it's mind-blowing, you know, where it's totally dedicated to research. Some of the stuff that they're doing that we can all learn from is brilliant. So I wouldn't dismiss what they do. But going back to the element of getting why are farmers reluctant to take on new technology? It is because in farming, our cycles of understanding what a change in farming does are so long. So as an arable farmer, if I make a change or two within my arable system, it's not until harvest that I get the results of that. If I'm a widget maker, I can make a change in the morning and I'll know by the afternoon what the effect was. So that's why farmers are so reluctant. They have to be certain. And AHDB has done a lot of research on this to find out that farmers, most farmers are theorist learners. The vast majority of farmers are theorist learners. They need to see it working. They need to have the confidence before they step into a new thing, before they will take it onto their farm. And there's a lot of work going into how do we encourage those theorist learners. There's not much activity looking at the activist learners, so the risk takers, the pioneers who will make that first step in the first place. And those are the people we should support, because they're the ones who will bring in the rest.
And just a quick extension to that, we also heard in the previous session that in the main, all this stuff sits under DEFRA, even though farming is, in the industrial strategy under one of the Agri-tech's, under the one of the sort of frontier technologies. Do you see any obvious negatives with farming mainly sitting under DEFRA and perhaps not sitting so much under DBT, and would there be an advantage to it?
I'm not entirely sure that I'm really qualified to answer that, but I would say that as long as there is a government department that is representing farmers and has our back. And I would say that, in recent years, DEFRA has been doing actually a really good job of recognising farmers' role in research, in innovation, and so on, and recognising that, that pull-through of technology. So the question asked the previous panel about the balance between fundamental research and applied research and so on. I think, there has been and DEFRA's played a very good driving role in saying, no, you must get that research onto farm, and has been sort of almost mandating it in the research programs that it's been funding. And I think they're doing actually a good job. I would like to see, so Adopt is only, £20 million worth of funding. Let's have more funding in that. It is so oversubscribed. There are some brilliant schemes coming out in Adopt. Let's get more money into that. Let's get more farmers involved in the Farming Innovation Programme. One big aspect of the Farming Innovation Programme, of all the Innovate UK funding, is the amount of bureaucracy that's involved. Right. Any farmer who has tried to deal with Innovate directly has come across that bureaucracy, and it's a toxic environment for a farmer. I'm not saying don't fund the farmer, but let's have something in between Innovate and the farmer themselves, so the farmer can get on with doing the job of innovating without having to worry about all the blasted paperwork and reporting that Innovate require.
Yeah, it's not just unique to farming, I have to say. But thank you so much, Tom. And having spoken about government supporting you, Peter, just turning to you now, how do you work with government, private sector and other partners to support uptake or scale up of novel technologies?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, we, as the CGIAR or CIMMYT, we develop the technologies, but we don't have the mandate, or we cannot scale those technologies. So this is where the private sector comes in. So when we develop a new technology, we'll either license it to the private sector depending on the technology, or depending on the crop. So that technology also is now given to the private sector for them to multiply. And most of the time you'll find that most of the small emerging, for example, seed companies, they don't have breeding programs, they don't have technology generation. So that really, they depend on us to generate the technologies that they can now take and scale it out to the farmers. For example, in terms of seed, sometimes we do provide them with breeder seed so that they can move faster to scale that particular technology. And also in terms of scaling, we help with the farmers, we help seed companies, for example, to do the on-farm testing, because some of these small seed companies, they don't have the capacity. And we also work with the government, because the government, they do have people, they do have some of the infrastructure, so that we can move with them and work with them. But what really lacks in most of the government, for example, you find that the extension services, you have maybe one extension officer to 2,000 smallholder farmers. So we have to find innovative way, for example, with mobile technology, with AI, to reach more of the farmers. So it is really important that we do this on farm, so that farmers can learn from other farmers in terms of the technology to be scaled out. And also one of the stumbling is the funding. You find that most of the governments, they don't invest a lot in terms of research. They don't have the funds to go out and showcase those technologies. Really, we depend more on the donor support. We depend more on some of the donors who will help, or they'll pick a certain technology and say, okay, this is a good technology. Can we work together with the private sector? And now we are pushing the private sector to say, okay, if you are actually making money or you are making profit, can we work together so that we can reach more farmers? Since the private sector, they are also more profit driven, they are more like to reach out. And one of the things with the technology, you find that it becomes very expensive if it's only one company that is promoting that technology. But at least if we have 4 or 5 companies, then they can compete. Then it become much easier for them to reach, because of the competition that the market is creating. But the government, yes, they do really want to reach out to more farmers, but the stumbling block or the barrier has always been funding, because there's always that competition, for health, for agriculture, and so forth.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Setimela. Just the question that was asked of Tom as well, are local farmers, are they enthusiastic about precision breeding and AI? Are they aware of it? What is the attitude of farmers in Zambia, and particularly smallholders, to these technologies?
Yes, I mean, they are enthusiastic. Commercial farmers, yes, in terms of precision, in terms of testing new varieties. But the problem with adaptation for smallholder farmers to adopt the technologies, that first they look at food security. Yeah. They say, okay, this is my field. If I grow so much maize, so much corn, will I be able to feed my family? If I'm going to change the risk that I'm taking, is that worth the risk? Am I going to, at the end of the season, am I going to have enough to be able to sell, be able to send my children to school? But slowly, yes. For example, with AI, we have been able to give farmers where they can identify different diseases in the field using AI. They've been able to send in information using to identify certain insects that they could not identify before. For example, just taking a picture or so, that now can generate information about the pests, about certain things in their fields. But for commercial farmers, precision agriculture, yes, because that helps them in terms of fertilizer, how much to apply, what to use, how much water to apply in their crops, because they are more like trying to save money for that the system is more profitable for them. So, for example, in Zambia, we do smallholder farmers, then we have commercial farmers. So we have that divide, and that divide, you find that is like day and night.
Right. Okay. So we've only got a few more minutes now. Thank you very much for that, Peter. And I want to focus on the ethics and potential inequalities around technology in agriculture. Daniel, are you able? Would you like to join?
Certainly. Maybe I could ask both of you. Are innovative technologies useful for and accessible to farms of all sizes? Is it only for the bigger farms? And if not, what would be needed to be done to change that?
Thank you. First of all, lovely to see you here, Daniel. And
apologies for being so late.
No, thank you very much for the enabling legislation that we've just been talking about in terms of the Precision Breeding Act and also ADOPT. To come to your question, my experience is that size is not a limiting factor for pioneering farmers, at any rate. So we've got some very small farmers as well as very large farmers who are helping us in our trials. And it's not down to size. It's down to the enthusiasm and the thirst for curiosity that the farmer has as to whether they're engaged in new technologies.
And Peter, what's your experience?
Yeah, I would say that where we are in terms of information for the smallholder farmers, it depends who is the household of the farm. For example, you find that if a farm is owned by a man, then he has more interactive, he can get more information. But if it's a woman farmer, then access to information, you find that it's a little bit more delayed compared to men farmers.
Why is that? Why is that?
That is just that because men are more interactive, they interact with other people. There is that barrier, that gender barrier within the farm systems that you find that, for example, if the household of
I think we'll probably want to, because we're running out of time here, and this is that's a big subject which we may well want to follow up on, Peter. But I think
It is, and I suppose what it's showing is it depends upon the context, doesn't it?
Context, yes.
And what would give you reassurance that balance of power between the small farmer and these big organisations could be corrected? What would give you confidence? I'm looking at you, Peter.
Okay, I mean the thing is that commercial farmers are more like profit driven. They want the way that they can maximize their production. While a smallholder farmer, he's more looking at food security to say, okay, if I have this, will I be able to feed my family? And also in terms of the markets, you find that commercial farmers are more like market driven, while smallholder farmers, they have less access to markets. And also if you take the smallholder farmers, in terms of quality, may not be there for them to sell their produce to the market. So we've been trying to say, okay, the smallholder farmers, can we aggregate your production so that we can help you find the markets, either through mobile, through AI. They can now have some of the access to the markets using mobile phones. Thank you.
Thank you. Then a final question to Tom. We've got time.
Yes, just looking at sort of inequalities.
So just to say, so we are running out of time, but I think we're very interested to know how we, given the concerns expressed by many, and including government departments in their submission to us, how can we ensure that small farmers can retain access to technologies and control of their data as technology is adopted?
Well, I'd say that the technologies that are coming through, and we've heard about it from Belinda, are very enabling for small farmers. And increasingly, so for example, what you can do with a mobile phone on your farm is just fantastic these days. So I'd say it's more enabling. One thing that we should bear in mind as technologies adapt and evolve and so on is that farmers are very wary of being held to ransom by technology. So for example, if precision breeding was rolled out only in hybrid crops, that would be a problem with a lot of farmers. A lot of farmers like hybrid crops and they like paying the premium for hybrid crops. They can see the benefits from it. There are a lot of farmers who don't. And so there should be that ability to access new technologies through whatever route is your preferred route. And if you look at the way hybrid technologies have been rolled out in the UK, for example, there's still a big chunk of the market that's conventional. And so that's the thing. And it's the same with data. That if you've got companies, for example, a large combine company that ties up your data and doesn't give you access to the data, that's a problem for farmers. Farmers don't mind necessarily paying a fair fee to get their data released, but they don't like to be held to ransom for it. And that's a crucial factor as we go forward. As we get more and more data coming out from farms, we don't like to feel that we're being held to ransom.
Okay. And Peter, what can we do to ensure that particularly smallholders retain access and control of their data?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult especially for the smallholder farmers, because they don't really keep records in terms of data. It's only when we do have on-farm trials that we do give them data to say, okay, this is how your crop has been performing in the past year and so forth. It's only the commercial farmers who really keep data, because they are more interested in terms of, okay, how much fertilizer to use, what works well in terms of insects or pesticides. And also they are more looking at the market. But for smallholder farmers who has less than 1 hectare, they don't really keep any data.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there, but it's an absolutely fascinating subject, and I think we have raised both the opportunities from technology and science in this country and abroad, and some of the challenges and the concerns which we will need to go into in more detail. But for the moment, may I thank you very much for joining us here and for your contributions. Order.